Number 1. The Rudston Monolith, Yorkshire, England. In the village of Rudston, population barely 400, stands the tallest megalith in Britain. It rises over 25 feet above ground. That makes it 3.5 feet taller than the tallest Saracen stone at Stonehenge. But what you see above the surface is only part of the story. The stone extends an estimated 15 feet underground, giving it a total length of roughly 40 feet. It weighs approximately 40 tons. That is the weight of a mature humpback whale standing upright in a churchyard. The monolith is gritstone. This matters because gritstone does not occur naturally anywhere near Rudston. The nearest source is Caton or Cornelian Bay, roughly 10 miles to the north. Some researchers believe the rock actually traveled closer to 40 miles from the Yorkshire moors. The prevailing transport theory suggests it was hauled via the River Gyle or Derwent, then dragged overland using wooden rollers. No metal tools existed at the time, no wheeled carts, just human muscle, timber, and whatever organizational system could coordinate the movement of a 40-ton block across open terrain. The top of the monolith appears broken off. If it was originally pointed, it would have stood around 28 feet tall. In 1773, someone capped it in lead to slow erosion. It dates to the late Neolithic or early Bronze Age and has a circumference of 5 meters. Now here's where Rudston gets genuinely strange. 3 Cursus monuments converge directly on the monolith's location. Cursuses are massive parallel ditched earthworks, essentially processional avenues, and having 3 of them point at one spot means this was not a casual marker. It was the focal point of a vast ritual landscape. 4 cursuses total surround the area, along with scattered round and square barrow cemeteries that have never been fully excavated. In the 18th century, antiquarian William Stukeley dug at the site and found many skulls, which he interpreted as evidence of sacrificial use. Standing stones of this kind are nationally rare. Estimates range from only 50 to 250 surviving examples across all of England. The Norman Church of All Saints was almost certainly built deliberately on this pre-existing sacred site. The name Rudston itself derives from Old English rudstein, meaning cross stone. The Romans also recognized whatever was happening here. They built a 4th century villa nearby that produced some of the finest Roman mosaics in northern England. A local legend claims the monolith was a spear hurled by the devil at the church, but his aim was off and it landed in the graveyard. The mainstream theory is straightforward. A Neolithic community invested enormous collective labor to mark a sacred convergence point for processional routes. Think of it as a ritual hub comparable to Avebury. The archaeological theory goes a step further. The deliberate selection of a specific non-local stone implies some form of geomantic or a geological knowledge. The material itself may have carried spiritual significance tied to its point of origin. Then there is the fringe interpretation. The convergence of cursuses, the anomalous stone, and the sheer scale of effort suggest a now lost understanding of Earth energies that made this exact location uniquely important. What no one has explained is why this particular stone, of all available stones, was chosen. The surrounding ritual landscape has never been fully excavated. What we currently see may represent only a fraction of the original complex. And the pattern of Christian structures being built directly on top of pagan sacred sites is well documented. It represents a deliberate strategy of religious overwriting. The original meaning of this place was systematically buried centuries before anyone thought to ask what it was. A 40-ton stone dragged miles by a community with no metal tools, placed at the exact convergence of massive earthworks, in a landscape littered with unexcavated burials. And we still cannot say why. But a single standing stone, however massive, is one thing. What happens when an entire mountain gets named after a giant? Number 2. The Cadair Idris Giant's Throne, Wales. Cadair Idris means Idris's chair. Idris is identified either as a giant or as Idris ap Gwydno, a 7th century prince of Meirionid who lived from roughly 560 to 632 AD. The mountain's peak, Pen y Gadair, stands at 893 meters. It is composed largely of Ordovician igneous rocks shaped by classic glacial erosion. From a distance, the 3-peaked formation looks precisely like a massive chair carved for a being of extraordinary size. That is not interpretation. That is geology producing an uncanny visual effect. According to the medieval Welsh triads, Idris was an astronomer. He sat atop the mountain to contemplate the stars and the trials of mankind. One legend says that while sitting by a lake at the mountain's base, Idris removed 3 stones from his shoe. One stone thrown toward Trosvenid is known today as Lek Idris. The huge boulders at the bottom of the valley are said to be debris he simply shook out. The folklore around this mountain is layered and specific. Anyone who sleeps alone on its slopes will supposedly awaken either a madman or a poet. This is rooted in bardic traditions where aspiring poets slept on the mountain seeking divine inspiration. Cadair Idris is also the hunting ground of Gwyn ap Nudd, lord of the Celtic underworld, who collects souls with a pack of red-eared hounds. Lyn Cawr, the glacial lake on the mountain, is said to be bottomless and home to a water dragon that King Arthur reportedly captured. According to scholar John Rees, 3 other giants existed in Welsh tradition alongside Idris. Their names were Ysgidion, Ofrium, and Ysbryn, and each had a mountain named after him near Cadair Idris. Welsh giants often wore aprons and collected beards. That is a peculiar detail repeated across multiple independent legends. Now here is the detail that bridges legend and physical evidence. In 1685, peat diggers at the base of Cadair Idris unearthed 2 skeletons measuring 7 feet tall. Both held hazel dowsing rods. Megalithic sites attributed to Idris are scattered across Wales, many with names connected to geomancy, surveying, and astronomy. In biblical tradition, Idris is equated with Enoch. Researchers have investigated whether the patriarch of the Bible was somehow connected to the giant Idris of Wales. The name Idris Gawr, meaning the giant, may itself be an error. He may originally have been known as Idris Arwyw, Idris the Course, with the giant mythology layered on afterward. The mainstream reading is that Idris was a historical Welsh king whose reputation grew into giant mythology over centuries. That is a common pattern in Celtic oral tradition. The archaeological reading notes the 1685 discovery of 7-foot skeletons with dowsing rods. Combined with megalithic sites linked to Idris across Wales, this suggests a real priestly or surveyor class whose physical stature and geomantic knowledge became mythologized. The fringe interpretation connects the astronomer giant to Enoch and biblical tradition, pointing toward an antediluvian race with advanced astronomical knowledge who shaped the Welsh landscape. The area surrounding the mountain contains some of the oldest and most unexplored megalithic ruins in Wales. Many have never been formally excavated. But 7-foot skeletons with dowsing rods are not the largest engineering puzzle in the ancient world. For that, we need to travel to Lebanon, where single stones weigh more than 3 Boeing 747s combined. Number 3. The Stone of the Pregnant Woman, Baalbek, Lebanon. The Stone of the Pregnant Woman lies in an ancient quarry 900 meters from the Heliopolis Temple complex. It weighs an estimated 1,000 tons. Some estimates place it closer to 1,200 tons. That is the equivalent of 3 fully loaded Boeing 747 aircraft, and it is not even the largest stone at the site. The Trilithon consists of 3 horizontally placed stones forming the temple podium. Each measures 19 meters long, 4.2 meters high, and 3.6 meters thick. Each weighs between 750 and 800 tons. For comparison, the heaviest stones at the Great Pyramid of Giza weigh approximately 80 tons. That is less than 1/10 the weight of a single Trilithon stone, but the quarry keeps producing surprises. In the 1990s, the Stone of the South was rediscovered in the same quarry. It weighs an estimated 1,242 tons. Then, in 2014, the German Archaeological Institute found what they called the Forgotten Stone. It weighs approximately 1,650 tons, measures 19.6 meters long, 6 meters wide, and at least 5.5 meters high. It is one of the largest stones ever carved by human hands. Modern construction cranes with capacities exceeding 500 tons would struggle to transport and position stones of this magnitude. Jean-Pierre Adams' 1977 study suggested rollers, capstans, and pulley blocks requiring 512 workers to move a 557-ton block. But the Trilithon stones are far heavier than what the study modeled. The quarry sat slightly higher than the temple complex, so technically no lifting was required. But the logistics of sliding a 1,000-ton block along a precise path remain unexplained. The supporting stone layer beneath the Trilithon features stones weighing 350 tons each, 11 meters wide. The precision with which the Trilithon stones are fitted, with minimal gaps between 800-ton blocks, showcases engineering that has no simple explanation. Origins of Baalbek trace back to Canaanite settlements from the ancient Bronze Age, roughly 2900 to 2300 BCE. No one knows which culture originally built the city. The earliest known civilization to settle the region was the Phoenicians. The Maronite Patriarch of Lebanon recorded a tradition stating the fortress was the most ancient building in the world, built by Cain in the year 133 of creation during a fit of raving madness, and that he peopled it with giants. Roman writings about Baalbek do not even mention the Trilithon stones. That is a remarkable omission for the most impressive feature of the complex. The name Stone of the pregnant woman has no definitive origin. One folk story says a pregnant woman convinced the people to cut it. Another says it grants fertility. The mainstream theory holds that Roman-era engineers building on earlier Phoenician foundations used massive labor forces with rollers, levers, and the quarry's natural downhill grade. The archaeological theory suggests the Trilithon predates the Roman temple entirely and belongs to a far older, unidentified megalithic culture. The Romans built on top of something they found, which is why their own records never mention the stones. The fringe interpretation notes the Cain and giants tradition, combined with the impossibility of replicating the feat with known ancient technology, and points to a pre-flood civilization with engineering capabilities we cannot explain. The progressive discovery of ever larger quarry stones, from 1,000 to 1,242 to 1,650 tons, implies a culture that routinely worked at this scale. The question no engineer has satisfactorily answered is simple. Why use single megablocks instead of manageable pieces? 40 20-ton blocks would do the same structural job. The choice to carve, move, and fit single 800-ton stones implies either a reason we do not understand or a capability we underestimate. And that question only deepens when you examine a tomb designed for the dead that contains almost no dead. Number 4. The Maeshowe tomb skeletons, Orkney, Scotland. Maeshowe is one of the largest chambered cairns in Orkney. It is 35 meters in diameter and 7.3 meters high. It was built around 2800 BC, roughly 200 years before the Great Pyramids of Egypt. That timeline is important because it means the architectural knowledge required to build Maeshowe existed in northern Scotland before it appeared in Egypt. On July the 20th, 1861, readers of the Orcadian newspaper were told that 2 female mummies had been discovered and also the skeleton of a gentleman over 10 feet long. The original writer was skeptical. He noted that no one, so far as he had heard, had been favored with the sight of the lady mummies or the long gentleman. Joe Ben's 16th century Latin tour of Orkney described bones found in a sepulchre that were joined together and were 14 feet long. The entrance passage runs 11 meters long, leading to a near-perfect square central chamber measuring 4.6 meters per side. Some construction slabs weigh up to 30 tons. Archaeologists estimate 100,000 man-hours of labor were required to build it. The monument is aligned so that winter solstice sunlight enters the passage and reaches the rear wall of the central chamber. 4 standing stones are embedded in each corner of the central chamber, a feature found in no other chambered tomb in Orkney. Vikings looted Maeshowe in the 12th century, as described in the Orkneyinga saga. They carved over 30 individual runic inscriptions on the walls, including one boasting of hidden treasure. James Ferrer led the 1861 excavation. He has been described as an assiduous, if, by modern standards, unscientific digger of mounds. His crude techniques caused significant damage. Ferrer was warned by locals that the mound contained a spirit called Hogboy, possessing great strength, a hogboon or mound dweller from Norse tradition. Only a trace of bone was found during excavation. Where thousands of expected skeletal remains went is unknown. The complete absence of skeletal remains in a structure clearly designed for the dead is one of the site's most puzzling aspects. Joe Ben's reported giant likely referred to a different mound near the Ring of Brodgar, but over centuries the account became attached to Maeshowe. Maeshowe forms part of a broader Neolithic ceremonial landscape, the Ring of Brodgar, the Stones of Stennis, now a UNESCO World Heritage Site. A Neolithic low road connects Maeshowe with the preserved village of Skare Brae. The mainstream theory holds the tomb was emptied over millennia by Viking raiders, later visitors, and natural decay. The giant skeleton reports are exaggerations or misidentifications common in pre-scientific archaeology. The archaeological theory suggests the standing stones inside the chamber may have symbolically represented the dead. The structure may have functioned not as a permanent tomb, but as a transitional space where bodies were processed and removed in ritual cycles. The fringe reading notes the 10-foot and 14-foot skeleton reports, combined with the systematic emptiness of a structure clearly built for burials, and suggests remains of unusual size were present and were removed, either by Vikings seeking curiosities or by later authorities who found the evidence inconvenient. 100,000 man-hours of labor for a tomb that held almost nothing. That contradiction alone is worth sitting with. But Maeshowe is at least visible from the ground. The next site on our list went unnoticed for centuries because it can only be seen from the sky. Number 5, the Rujm el-Hiri Wheel of Giants, Golan Heights. Rujm el-Hiri consists of concentric circles of basalt stone with a central tumulus, located 16 kilometers east of the Sea of Galilee on a plateau covered with hundreds of dolmens. It contains more than 42,000 basalt rocks arranged in concentric circles. The central mound stands 15 feet tall. The outermost wall is 520 feet in diameter and 8 feet high. Total material used, between 37,500 and 40,000 tons of partly worked stone. Researcher M. Freakman estimates more than 25,000 working days were required to build it. It dates to the early Bronze Age II period, roughly 3000 to 2700 BCE. That makes it roughly contemporaneous with Stonehenge, earning it the title Stonehenge of the Levant. It went completely unnoticed for centuries because the pattern is invisible from ground level. Only aerial surveys conducted in the late 1960s revealed the massive bullseye formation. It was catalogued during a 1967 to 1968 archaeological survey by Shmariah Gutman and Claire Epstein using Syrian maps. The Hebrew name Gilgal Rephaim means wheel of spirits or a wheel of ghosts. Rephaim refers to the biblical race of giants, the Rephaim, who dwelt in the Bashan and Golan region. Deuteronomy chapter 3 verse 13 calls the region the land of giants, the kingdom of the giant king Og. The first excavation by Professor Moshe Kochavi discovered that the inner stone pile is actually a passage grave. No human remains have ever been found within the central tomb. Archaeologist Rami Arov suggests excarnation, the practice of defleshing by birds, was performed here with bones collected later. Precious few artifacts have been recovered. A single chalcolithic pin, seemingly dropped by looters, is among the only finds. No radiocarbon dating was possible because no prehistoric organic material was ever recovered. A 2024 study by Tel Aviv University and Ben-Gurion University determined that tectonic movements over 150 million years at a rate of 8 to 15 millimeters per year have significantly altered walls and entrances. This disproved the astronomical observatory theory. Another 2024 remote sensing study discovered previously unknown structures nearby, including additional circular walls and small fences in flower-like clusters. The site is accessible only during Sabbath. It sits inside a military firing zone near the Syrian border. No society in the region at that time is known to have had the organizational capacity for a project requiring more than 25,000 working days. The mainstream theory treats it as a ceremonial or funerary site built incrementally by pastoral communities over generations. The archaeological theory suggests the excarnation practice, the passage, grave, and the surrounding dolmen field indicate a sophisticated death cult with complex rituals. The scale implies a regional religious authority that has not been identified. The fringe reading notes the biblical identification of this exact region as the land of the Rephaim giants, combined with the labor estimates and complete absence of organic remains, and points to a pre-biblical civilization whose identity has been erased. The military firing zone conveniently prevents independent investigation. 40,000 tons of stone arranged in a pattern visible only from the air, attributed to a race of biblical giants. But what about structures even older than the pyramids built without metal tools or wheels? Number 6. The Ġgantija Temples, Gozo, Malta. The Ġgantija Temples date to 3600 to 3200 BCE. They predate both Stonehenge and the Egyptian pyramids. They are among the oldest freestanding structures on Earth. The name translates to Giant's Tower. Local legend says a giantess named Sansuni built the structures, carrying enormous stones on her head while nursing a baby. The massive boundary wall uses an alternating header and stretcher technique. Some megaliths exceed 5 meters in length and weigh over 50 tons. No metal tools were available to the builders. The wheel had not yet been introduced to Malta. Small round stones found at the site may have been used as ball-bearing rollers to transport the blocks, though this remains debated. There are two separate temples. The South Temple dates to 3600 BC. The North Temple dates to 3000 BC. The site was in continuous use for over 600 years. The temples feature a cloverleaf-shaped layout with interconnected structures, inner chambers, altars, and niches. Statues resembling the mother goddess, an obese female deity venerated across the Mediterranean, were found within the temples. Unusually large bones and elongated skulls have been discovered at various prehistoric sites across Malta. A statuette from the nearby Zagros stone circle shows twin corpulent figures suggesting a culture that venerated robust physical forms. Within excavated Maltese sites, strange finds include dismembered and burnt human remains, trepanned elongated skulls, stone spheres, and modified teeth. The temples are oriented on a southeast axis, the same alignment as most other Maltese temples, possibly connected to solar observations. The nearby Zagra Hypogeum, discovered by Otto Bayer in the 1820s, revealed 220,000 bones of dismembered human skeletons. The same site contained tusks of extinct dwarf elephants, hippopotamus, deer, and bears. Two monumental entrance pillars were removed in 1828. By the late 1830s, the site was reburied and its location lost until 1964. Some limestone megaliths show signs of shaping with obsidian tools, a volcanic glass not native to the Maltese islands, implying trade networks. The temple's acoustic properties show deliberate sound channeling design, suggesting ritual use involving chanting or music. The culture that built these temples vanished abruptly around 2500 BCE with no clear explanation. The mainstream theory holds that a sophisticated Neolithic farming society developed advanced construction techniques over centuries. The giant legends arose later to explain structures that seemed impossible for ordinary humans. The fringe interpretation notes the combination of elongated skulls, oversized bones, obsidian tools from non-local sources, acoustic engineering, and the sudden disappearance of the builders. It suggests a distinct population, possibly a priestly class of unusual physical stature, whose knowledge and bloodline ended abruptly. No metal, no wheel, 50-ton megaliths shaped with volcanic glass imported from off-island, acoustic chambers tuned to specific frequencies, and then silence. The builders simply vanished, but not every mystery hides in the deep past. Some are as recent as a mining operation in the Nevada desert. Number 7. Lovelock Cave Remains, Nevada, United States. Northern Paiute oral history describes the Sitika as a legendary tribe with red hair who were said to be cannibals. In some versions, they are described as giants. The name Sitika literally means tule eaters in the Northern Paiute language, referring to the fibrous reed they used to make rafts. The legend says the Paiute and other tribes banded together to drive the Sitika into a cave, then set the entrance on fire. In 1911, miners David Pugh and James Hart began removing a guano layer estimated at 3 to 6 feet deep, weighing about 250 tons. The mining operation destroyed many artifacts in the process. Miner James H. Hart's written report recalls Fonkier finding a striking-looking body of a man 6 feet 6 inches tall. His body was mummified and his hair distinctly red. The best adult mummy specimen was subsequently boiled and destroyed by a local fraternal lodge that wanted the skeleton for initiation purposes. Archaeologist Llewellyn Loud recovered around 10,000 archaeological specimens. A 1924 excavation with Mark Harrington uncovered the famous duck decoys, fashioned from real duck skin and feathers, among the oldest known hunting decoys in the world. A pair of sandals from the cave were radiocarbon dated to 10,000 years ago, the oldest footwear ever found in Nevada. A University of Nevada study indicates the so-called giants were about 6 feet tall, but the recovery of 15-inch sandals is cited by others as evidence supporting the Paiute account. A 1931 Nevada Review Miner article reported 2 very large skeletons in the Humboldt dry lake bed. One measured 8.5 feet tall, wrapped in gum-covered fabric similar to Egyptian mummies. Sarah Winnemucca, daughter of Paiute chief Winnemucca, wrote in 1883 that she possessed some of the CTK's reddish hair handed down from father to son and a dress trimmed with it. DNA testing of one individual, designated Lovelock 4, found a Eurasian haplotype originating in Bronze Age Central Asians, carbon dated to 200 AD. Some coprolites found in the cave contained human hair, possible evidence of cannibalism among the cave's inhabitants. Historian Adrian Mayer notes that hair pigment can turn rusty red after death under certain conditions. Doctor. Sheila Brooks of UNLV determined some bones were from cows, not giants, and the human bones were from individuals maybe 6 feet tall. Big, but not that big. The larger skeletal remains were reportedly misplaced, stored in private collections, or never formally documented. The cave sits beside the former lakebed of Lake La Hontan, a massive Pleistocene-era lake that once covered much of western Nevada. Similar legends of red-haired giants arriving by reed boats exist in Peru, recorded by 16th century chronicler Pedro Cieza de Leon. The mainstream theory holds that the Sitica were a normal-sized rival tribe mythologized over generations. The red hair is post-mortem pigment change. The large sandals accommodated insulation, not giant feet. The fringe reading notes the Eurasian DNA, the 15-inch sandals, the 8.5-foot skeleton reports, cross-continental parallels with Peruvian legends, and the systematic destruction and disappearance of the best physical evidence. It asks whether a non-native population of unusual stature once existed here, and whether their remains have been deliberately suppressed. Eurasian DNA in a Nevada cave, red-haired mummies, 15-inch sandals, and the best specimen boiled for a fraternal lodge initiation. But the most disturbing pattern of evidence disappearance does not involve a cave in the desert. It involves an underground sanctuary in Malta where 7,000 skeletons once lay and where almost nothing remains. Number 8. The Hypogeum of Ħal-Saflieni, Malta. In 1902, construction workers excavating building foundations stumbled upon an underground sanctuary. The structure consists of 3 levels carved into limestone, with an estimated 2,000 tons of stone removed during construction. When discovered, 7,000 skeletons were found piled within the chambers. They possessed a unique characteristic: elongated skulls. One skull lacked the fossa median entirely, the joint that runs along the top of the skull. After 1985, all elongated skulls found in the Hypogeum, along with elongated skulls from multiple other ancient Maltese sites, disappeared without a trace. A 1920 National Geographic article described the early Maltese inhabitants as a race of long-skulled people of lower medium height, akin to the early people of Egypt. The oracle room is a rectangular chamber with extraordinary acoustic properties. Anything spoken reverberates throughout the entire Hypogeum. Research by the universities of Trieste and Siena showed the reverberation resonates at approximately 110 Hz, the same frequency linked to altered states of consciousness and measurable effects on human brain activity. The famous sleeping lady figurine was found in a deep pit leading to the 3rd level. It depicts an obese woman on a couch wearing a pleated skirt measuring 12.2 centimeters long. The Holy of Holies within the Hypogeum was designed to be illuminated by the winter solstice sunrise. Red ochre spiral and floral patterns adorn walls and ceilings, including spirals enclosed in pentagons and honeycomb patterns. Maltese Jesuit archaeologist Manuel Madri began excavating in 1903, but died unexpectedly 5 years later. All his reports were lost. The initial skeleton count of 33,000 was reduced to 7,000, then reduced again to 100, after UNESCO involvement beginning in 1980. A temporary museum exhibit titled Alien Headaches. The Hypogeum Skulls. Enigma addressed the elongated skulls. Forensic examination confirmed the elongation is not the result of artificial cranial deformation. The Hypogeum includes underground replicas of above-ground megalithic features, trilithons, and doorways carved in the same style as surface temples. The 3rd and deepest level is sealed off from visitors and has never been fully studied. Only 80 visitors per day are permitted, with tickets booked weeks or months in advance. The nearby Hypogeum of Santa Lucia was never excavated and was sealed shut after discovery in 1973. The mainstream theory holds that the elongated skulls result from genetic variation within a Mediterranean Neolithic population. The acoustic properties are incidental to the rock type. The disappearance of skulls is bureaucratic mismanagement, not conspiracy. The archaeological theory notes the deliberate 110 Hz resonance, the solstice alignment, and the underground replication of surface architecture. It suggests a priesthood with advanced knowledge of acoustics and astronomy. The skulls may represent a distinct social or genetic class. The French interpretation points to forensically confirmed elongation that cannot be explained by binding, acoustic engineering at brain-altering frequencies, the systematic disappearance of physical evidence, the death of the lead archaeologist and loss of his reports, and the progressive reduction of skeleton counts from 33,000 to 100. The pattern, it argues, is too consistent to be accidental. 33,000 skeletons reduced to 100, skulls that forensic analysis says were not artificially deformed, all vanished. An underground chamber tuned to 110 hertz. And the lead archaeologist dead with his notes missing. That pattern of disappearance connects directly to the most famous ancient monument on Earth. Number 9. Giant skeletons near Stonehenge, England. Geoffrey of Monmouth's 1136 Historia Regum Britannia describes the wizard Merlin disassembling a stone circle called the Giant's Dance in Ireland and having giants reassemble it as Stonehenge. The Celtic giants legend describes two types of giants. Giants of antiquity who had not been born into the world by the way of all flesh, and a warrior class who erected Stonehenge as their trophy. That taxonomic specificity is unusual for mythology. Documented evidence describes an entire skeleton unearthed just 1 mile from Stonehenge, reported as 13 feet and 10 inches tall. Sir Thomas Eliot, an early 1500s diplomat, reported a skeleton of about 14 feet 10 inches found alongside an ancient book containing unusual inscriptions, plus a large inscribed metal disc nearby. In 1719, a 9-foot 4-inch skeleton was unearthed in a mound near Salisbury. Within one barrow mound near Stonehenge, an extremely large man was found with a massive hammer of dark-colored stone at his feet and a twisted copper or brass object. Stonehenge itself was constructed in phases from about 3100 BC to 1600 BC. The famous Sarsen Circle was placed between 2600 and 2400 BC. According to Arthurian legend, the stones were healing stones brought by giants from Africa to Ireland. Since 1447, a giant effigy has been paraded around Salisbury known as St. Christopher, a Canaanite giant from the Bible. It is currently on display at Salisbury Museum. Over 250 accounts of giant human skeletons ranging from 7 feet to 21 feet have been documented in Britain's archaeological and historical record, often measured by notable scientists and scholars. In 1660, a skeleton measuring 21 feet long was unearthed at Corbridge near Hadrian's Wall. In 1191, monks of Glastonbury Abbey claimed King Arthur's skeleton was found at 9 feet tall, with a female skeleton beside it bearing a plait of blonde hair. In 1856, two skeletons measuring 8 feet 5 inches and 8 feet 7 inches were discovered in stone-lined graves on Lundy Island alongside average-sized skeletons. Archaeologist Mike Parker Pearson suggests the Arthurian legend may hold a grain of truth. Bluestones were likely brought from the Wan Mawn Stone Circle in Wales. The Salisbury Plain area is managed by the Ministry of Defense with military no-go zones, limiting independent archaeological investigation. The ancient book with unusual script found alongside the 14-foot skeleton has never been recovered. The mainstream theory holds that pre-scientific measurements were unreliable, large skeletons represent tall but normal individuals, and Monmouth's account is literary fiction. The archaeological theory notes the consistency of reports across centuries, the specific measurements and associated artifacts including hammers, metal discs, and inscribed books, and suggests a real population of unusually tall individuals. The fringe theory points to the combination of giant skeletons, massive hammers, inscribed metal discs, and books with unknown scripts. It argues this paints a picture of a complex ancient culture systematically erased. 250 accounts across Britain. Specific measurements, specific artifacts, specific locations. But Britain is just one country. Expand the search to an entire continent and the numbers become staggering. Number 10. Giant skeleton. Newspaper reports 19th and 20th century United States. Throughout the 19th and 20th centuries, numerous reports of giant skeletal remains surfaced from Wisconsin, Ohio, the Appalachian region, and dozens of other states. Giants on Record by Hugh Newman and Jim Vieira documents over 1,500 newspaper accounts of giant skeleton discoveries across North America. Many accounts describe skeletons between 7 and 12 feet tall found in mound builder sites, often accompanied by copper armor, carved pipes, and other artifacts. Newspapers, including the New York Times, published articles claiming giant skeletons were found during archaeological digs. The Smithsonian Institution is repeatedly named as the repository where giant remains were sent and subsequently lost or suppressed. In 2014, Jim Vieira's TEDx talk on giant skeletons was controversially removed from the internet, alongside similar talks by Graham Hancock and Rupert Sheldrake. Abraham Lincoln himself referenced giants in an 1848 lecture. He said the eyes of that species of extinct giants whose bones fill the mounds of America have gazed on Niagara. Reports from Wisconsin describe giant skeletons in massive effigy mounds, some with elongated skulls and double rows of teeth, a detail repeated across dozens of independent accounts from different states. The Bureau of Ethnology under John Wesley Powell systematically collected mound builder artifacts in the late 1800s, but oversized skeletal remains were consistently omitted from published reports. Ohio's Serpent Mound area produced multiple accounts of 7 to 8 foot skeletons buried with elaborate grave goods. None are locatable today. Accounts from New York, Tennessee, Indiana, Minnesota, California, and dozens more states describe the same pattern. Oversized remains found, briefly reported, then lost to institutional custody. Many reports describe remains found with copper tools, mica ornaments, and engraved stone tablets, artifacts consistent with the Adena and Hopewell cultures dating from 800 BC to 400 AD. Physical anthropologist Alice Hrdlicki of the Smithsonian actively debunked giant skeleton claims despite never examining many of the reported remains firsthand. Modern NAGPRI legislation, passed in 1990, has made it significantly harder to study or display indigenous remains, complicating any re-examination of historical finds. The mainstream theory holds that 19th century newspapers routinely published sensational stories. Giant skeletons were misidentified animal bones, tall but normal individuals, or outright hoaxes. The archaeological theory notes that the Adena and Hopewell cultures did produce individuals of above average stature, and the consistent association with specific artifact types suggests real discoveries poorly documented by non-professional excavators. The fringe reading points to the sheer volume of 1,500 accounts, the geographic spread across dozens of states, the temporal range of over a century, and the Smithsonian's repeated role as evidence terminus. Lincoln's own reference, the removal of modern talks on the subject, it asks whether this constitutes the largest suppressed chapter in North American archaeological history, 1,500 accounts, dozens of states over a century, and the same ending every time. The remains disappear. That pattern deserves its own examination. The mechanism repeats across continents and centuries. Malta's elongated skulls vanish after 1985. Maeshowe's tomb is empty. Lovelock Cave's best mummy is boiled by a fraternal lodge. Manuel Magri dies unexpectedly in Malta, and his excavation reports are lost. The Smithsonian receives giant remains that can never be located again. The Bureau of Ethnology omits oversized remains from published reports while collecting every other mound builder artifact. The Zagra Hypogeum's entrance pillars are removed in 1828, and the site is lost until 1964. Jim Vieira's TEDx talk is removed from the internet. The ancient book found with the 14-foot skeleton near Stonehenge has never been recovered. The initial Maltese skeleton count drops from 33,000 to 7,000 to 100 across institutional transfers. Alice Hrdlicka debunks giant claims without first-hand examination. Rujm el-Hiri sits inside a military firing zone. Salisbury Plain has Ministry of Defense no-go zones. The Hypogeum of Santa Lucia is sealed shut in 1973 and never excavated. The pattern is not limited to one era or region. It spans from 16th century Orkney to 20th century Nevada to 21st century internet censorship. The mainstream explanation is that pre-scientific archaeology was careless, institutions were disorganized, and sensational claims faded when rigor was applied. The alternative reading notes the consistency of the disappearance mechanism across different institutions, countries, and centuries, and asks whether this represents systemic bias rather than random incompetence. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, but the active removal of evidence is a different category entirely. Whether through neglect or design, the result is identical. The physical evidence that could settle the question no longer exists. At what point does a pattern of institutional loss become a pattern of institutional suppression? The 1920 National Geographic article, Sarah Winnemucca's 1883 testimony, Lincoln's 1848 lecture. These are contemporary sources that took the claims seriously. This is not a conspiracy theory. It is an observable, documented pattern that demands explanation regardless of one's position on giants. But set the skeletons aside for a moment. The engineering question stands on its own. The heaviest stones at Giza weigh 80 tons. Baalbek's Trilithon stones weigh 800 tons each. The Forgotten Stone weighs 1,650 tons. Modern cranes exceeding 500-ton capacity would struggle with Baalbek's stones, and those cranes require diesel engines, steel cables, and reinforced foundations that did not exist. Ġgantija's builders had no metal tools and no wheel. They shaped limestone megaliths with obsidian tools from non-local sources. Maeshowe required an estimated 100,000 man-hours and achieved winter solstice alignment through an 11-meter passage, precision that implies astronomical observations sustained over years. The Rujm el-Hiri required more than 25,000 working days with 40,000 tons of basalt, yet no society in the region is known to have had the organizational capacity. The Hypogeum had 2,000 tons of stone removed underground with no metal tools, creating chambers with deliberate 110 Hz acoustic resonance. The question is not just about strength, it is about precision. Baalbek's 800-ton blocks fitted with minimal gaps. Maeshowe's corbelled walls forming a perfect square chamber. Mainstream engineering analysis relies on labor multiplication, the principle that enough humans with enough time can move anything. But this does not explain the choice to use single massive blocks when smaller stones were readily available. Why did Baalbek's builders choose 800-ton monoliths instead of 40 20-ton blocks? The structural result would be the same. The choice implies either a reason we do not understand or a capability we underestimate. Acoustic engineering at Ġgantija and the Hypogeum suggests knowledge of sound properties that goes beyond trial and error. The solstice alignments at Maeshowe, the Hypogeum, and the Ġgantija Temples imply a shared astronomical tradition across Neolithic cultures, separated by thousands of miles. The 2024 tectonic study at Rujm el-Hiri demonstrated that geological movement over millennia has distorted original alignments, meaning the original precision was even greater than what we observe today. No written records survive from any of these builders. Modern replication attempts have never been conducted at the scale of Baalbek's largest stones. Limestone, basalt, gritstone, different materials, different continents, same impossible scale. The builders of each site vanished. Malta's temple culture disappeared around 2500 BCE. The Rujm el-Hiri builders are unidentified. Rudston's community left no written record. The engineering question is not whether ancient people were intelligent. They clearly were. The question is whether our models of ancient capability are adequate to explain what they built. The fundamental laws of physics have not changed. Gravity pulled the same way then. Friction resisted the same way. Mass weighed the same. Whatever methods were used operated within the same physical universe we inhabit today. And then there are the skulls. The distinction matters here. Artificial cranial deformation, skull binding, has been practiced globally for thousands of years. It reshapes existing bone. But the Maltese skulls present a different case entirely. The Hypogeum exhibit forensically confirmed that the elongation was not the result of artificial cranial deformation. When discovered in 1902, the Hypogeum contained skulls lacking the fossa median, the cranial suture line. That feature cannot be produced by binding. Elongated skulls at Ġgantija and other Maltese prehistoric sites parallel the Hypogeum finds. After 1985, all of them disappeared. The progressive reduction of the official skeleton count from 33,000 to 7,000 to 100 coincided with institutional transfers and UNESCO involvement. Trapined, meaning surgically drilled, elongated skulls found in Malta suggest a population that practiced cranial surgery, indicating medical knowledge well beyond what is typically associated with Neolithic communities. Similar elongated skulls appear in Paracas, Peru, where DNA testing has yielded genetic markers not found in known Native American, European, or Asian populations. The Wisconsin giant skeleton reports also describe elongated skulls alongside double rows of teeth. Artificial binding flattens and elongates existing bone. It cannot add cranial volume or eliminate suture lines. Mainstream anthropology classifies most elongated skulls as products of cultural head-binding practices, but the specific case of skulls lacking the fossa median presents a direct challenge to this classification. Suture absence is a skeletal feature, not a deformation result. The Maltese alien headaches exhibit acknowledged the enigma publicly, but was temporary. The skulls themselves were not returned to display. The cross-cultural presence of elongated skulls in Malta, Peru, Egypt, Crimea, and Bolivia raises questions about convergent practice versus shared ancestry. DNA analysis could resolve the question definitively if specimens were available for testing. The disappearance of the skulls after 1985 effectively prevents the one test that could settle the debate. The timing is notable. The skulls vanished just as DNA analysis was becoming a viable scientific tool. And underneath all the engineering and the bones lies a deeper question. Why do so many unconnected cultures independently describe giants? The geographic spread is remarkable. Paiute in Nevada, Welsh at Cadair Idris, Lebanese at Baalbek, Maltese with Sansuna, Hebrew with the Rephaim and Og, English at Stonehenge, Scottish in Orkney. All describe giants independently. The Paiute Teikot legend includes specific details, tule rafts, red hair, cannibalism, that partially correlate with archaeological finds including Eurasian DNA, 15-inch sandals, and coprolites containing human hair. Welsh tradition names specific giants and associates them with specific mountains, standing stones, and astronomical practices. The Caingic giants legend distinguishes between two types of giants. That taxonomic specificity is unusual for pure fiction. Deuteronomy chapter 3 verse 13 specifically names the Golan Heights region as the land of giants and the kingdom of Og, precisely where Rujm el-Hiri stands. The Maronite Patriarch's tradition attributes Baalbek to Cain and giants in a region where 1,650-ton carved stones actually exist. Sarah Winnemucca's 1883 testimony is first person from a chief's daughter describing physical evidence she personally possessed. Lincoln's 1848 reference treats giants as a known category. Oral traditions are increasingly validated by archaeology. Troy was myth until Heinrich Schliemann found it. The Aboriginal Australian oral record of sea level rise has been confirmed as accurate over 10,000 years. The mainstream position requires that dozens of unconnected cultures independently invented the same fiction. The alternative requires only that they independently observed the same phenomenon. Cross-continental parallels are particularly striking. Red-haired giants on reed boats appear in both Paiute tradition in Nevada and Peruvian tradition recorded by Tiza de Leon. Giants in Welsh folklore are credited with geomancy, surveying, and astronomy, practical skills, not just brute strength. The giantess legends of Malta and the giant astronomer of Wales both associate unusual beings with construction and knowledge, not merely size. Modern anthropology tends to interpret giant legends as metaphors for powerful ancestors or natural formations, but this interpretation struggles with the physical specificity of many accounts. Oral tradition should be treated as data requiring interpretation, not dismissed as noise. Every major archaeological discovery of the last 200 years was preceded by a legend that professionals dismissed until they found the evidence. What is not in dispute is this: the stones exist. The engineering is real. The accounts are documented. A 40-ton gritstone monolith was moved across Yorkshire by people with no metal tools. 800-ton blocks were fitted with millimeter precision at Baalbek. Temples older than the pyramids were built on Malta without wheels. 40,000 tons of basalt were arranged in a pattern visible only from the sky. An underground sanctuary was carved with chambers that resonate at 110 hertz. These are not legends. They are measurable, physical facts. The questions that remain are not about whether these things happened, but how and by whom. The skeletal evidence that could answer those questions has, in case after case, disappeared from institutional custody. Whether through carelessness or design, the result is the same. The evidence is gone. What remains are the stones themselves. Too large to lose, too heavy to hide. The fundamental laws of nature have not changed. Gravity pulled the same way. Friction resisted the same way. Mass weighed the same. Whatever methods were used operated within the same physical universe we inhabit today. The builders understood something about working with those laws that we have not yet recovered. Every culture that encountered these sites recognized them as extraordinary and attributed them to beings of extraordinary capability. The word giant may be literal, metaphorical, or something in between. But it is universal. The stones do not argue. They simply stand. They were placed by someone using some method for some reason. The honest answer, after surveying the evidence, is that we do not fully know who, how, or why. And that is not a failure of knowledge. It is an invitation to keep looking.